Okay, I think it looks like we've admitted everyone. So hello, everybody. Welcome to today's session. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on Sustainable Careers for New Graduates, part of our Sustainability Careers Discovery Week. We've got some other sessions taking place this week as part of this Discovery Week. So if you do want to find out more about sustainability after this session, then do have a look either on My Career or our careers blog for details of all the other sessions we've got running. But we're joined today by three graduates from the University of Leeds who are all working in sustainability, and they're going to talk to you a bit about their career journey and offer tips and hints. And you've got the opportunity to ask some questions. So just before we get going, I just wanted to briefly highlight the Graduate Outcomes Survey, which is a survey run by the government in the UK to help support future university students. The survey asks what you've been up to since graduation and to what extent your degree has helped you along the way. And your response helps the university evaluate and make changes to our courses. So it's really, really helpful for both staff and future students at the university. And again, allows them to gain an insight into career destinations as well. So it usually takes place about 15 months after your graduation. So if you graduated sort of in summer 24, you'd be surveyed in September 25, and summer 25, September 26, and so on. Please do look out for the email when it comes through. It'll be from University of Leeds at graduateoutcomes.com, and it only takes 10 minutes max or so to complete. So yeah, if you do see that pop into your inbox anytime in the future as a graduate, then we'd really appreciate you helping us out with that. But yeah, without further ado, I'm going to introduce today's speakers. So as I said, they're all University of Leeds graduates, so they're all in your shoes recently. So we've got Andrew Kemp from the London Borough of Newham, Ariana Gialetti from the Caribbean Development Bank, joining us all the way from Barbados, and Ruby Harlow from Bella Zoo. So how we're going to make this work, we're going to hand over to Andrew to begin with, and then Ariana, and then Ruby. They're all going to spend 10 minutes or so talking about whatever areas they want to talk about. And what we will do then is we'll leave plenty of time for questions at the end. You can drop questions into the Q&A box at the top of this Teams link, and we will get to those at the end. And feel free to drop them in as people are talking, and we can get to those at the end. But without further ado, I will stop sharing my slides and pass over to our first speaker, Andrew.
Great, thanks very much, Tom. Really good to be invited to speak to people here. Feels quite a long time ago since I was at Leeds Uni now, graduated in 2016, but then stayed in Leeds for a few years afterwards, so still a place that's really close to my heart. Yeah, so my name's Andy. I work in climate action at London Borough of Newham, so that's a local government position. My role is Senior Climate Action Programme Manager, which is a bit of a mouthful, but basically means that I work across all the different areas of climate. So I can be working one day on energy and kind of master planning, thinking about how we make a more equitable energy system. And then the other day I could be working with a school looking at biodiversity or water security, food growing, all sorts of different things. We kind of think of climate as a wraparound service that actually impacts in all different areas of public life. And so what we're trying to do in the council is to provide climate solutions that actually affect people's lives in a positive way today, and not just thinking about this 20, 30, 40 year long initiative to kind of change the face of the way that people understand the environment, but actually think about what is the short-term impact on people in our borough. And the reason that we think that way is because predominantly we are a borough in East London with a lot of socioeconomic challenges, and really what we're concerned about is climate justice. So yeah, that's kind of the way that we're trying to think about what I do. And I think I just wanted to spend a little bit of time, I guess, before doing questions and answers later, just thinking about how I've ended up in a role that is, I think, really suited to the way that I've been thinking about these kind of issues for quite a while, and how that has kind of led to what I find actually to be a really satisfying and fulfilling career. So I wasn't always interested necessarily in sustainability and climate. My family have always been very eco-conscious. My dad was an ecologist, and so it has always been something that I've been aware of. But I wouldn't say that it was something that I necessarily saw myself working in when I was at university. When I was at Leeds, I was studying Chinese and politics. And after Leeds, I went and did a global studies master's, which was based in a few different countries all over the world. And it was really during that master's course that I kind of married my interest, which was fundamentally in people and social inequality, with the climate question. And funnily enough, it was actually a translation internship that I was doing in Beijing, where I really started to think about the way that people, and in particular marginalized communities, are experiencing climate change. So yeah, that was kind of my route into thinking about climate. And then ended up writing my thesis for my master's on the way that different minority groups in China experience environmental issues and the relationship that they have with the government as a result of that. And then at the end of the pandemic, this kind of led me into a job that was looking at climate from a much more technical point of view, where I was working for central government in London on a grant scheme that is aimed at delivering low carbon heating systems and retrofit across public buildings. And from there, it was that I ended up eventually working my way back into a more kind of climate justice focused role, which I'm in now in local government. And I think it was quite an interesting journey for me, because actually what I really love about this job now is that we're not just thinking about climate as a technical issue or as an issue that can be solved without considering what are the actual impacts on people in their ordinary lives. And I think what we see in a lot of our work is that the relationship that people have with the environment in general is really under strain at the moment. And a lot of people who are in quite precarious circumstances, whether it's battling things like food insecurity or fuel poverty, are really struggling to justify making changes to their lifestyle that are seen as expensive or inconvenient. And really, we don't want to ask people to make those kind of changes. We believe that the problems are much more structural, and actually the solutions can be really beneficial to people. And so really working at that intersection of where a climate solution can also put money back in people's purses, or help them to provide food for their kids or live in warmer, healthier homes, is a really interesting space to be working in, because that ultimately is, I think, the best way to communicate sustainability as something that people can get behind. It's this idea that it's actually making your life better. It's not making it worse. It's not inconvenient, and it's not expensive, and that isn't always the way that it's perceived. So I think I'll leave it there and leave it nice and open for questions and answers later. But yeah, really good to speak about this kind of issue with people that hopefully are quite similarly minded.
Yeah, thanks so much, Andrew. Really interesting, and an interesting insight into, it doesn't necessarily need to have been the dream for kind of the last 10 years of your life or whatever to work in sustainability. There's still roots into that. And yeah, if there's any questions, do feel free to pop them into the chat. But we'll hand over to our second speaker now, who is Ariana from the Caribbean Development Bank.
Thank you, Tom, and hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm very pleased to connect with you today. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm happy to share also my career journey, also a work in progress in sustainability, as Andrew mentioned. And happy to present, let's say, my journey from my early studies in Italy to my master degree in Leeds, and my current role that I'm going to start actually next week. The Caribbean Development Bank here in Barbados. yeah, really hope that yeah, my story will inspire you or give any tip or help. But yes, as mentioned, I'm originally from Italy. Here I studied political science and international relations at the University of Perugia, and I graduated in 2016 for my bachelor. And I've always been interested in studies in global issues and political systems. That indeed also led me to participate in the Erasmus program in Granada in Spain, where I also gained a more international perspective on political economy subjects. And during my initial studies, I became particularly interested in environmental policy and climate change governance and policy. So that's why I decided to enroll in the Master of Science degree in Climate Change and Environmental Policy at the University of Leeds in 2019. I undertook this course as part-time, so I graduated in 2021, and I would also be curious to hear what the new graduates' master's course were. But indeed, through this course, I gained a really deep understanding of climate change related topics, from its physical science basis to mitigation, and in particular impacts and adaptation interventions, which is, let's say, the sector where then I specialize my professional career in. And here I would also like to mention that I'm really grateful for the career accelerator programs that were available at the University of Leeds. For example, the mentorship program, the tutoring, and also the career center. They were really helpful in shaping my professional journey, and that helped me connect with my previous employers. In fact, through the Career Center, I gained support with, let's say, tailoring CV and LinkedIn profiles, but also networking with different institutions that led me take 2 different internships during the master course that I attended at Leeds. One with an Italian consultancy agency that was working on sustainable European projects, so focusing on sustainable transportation and mobility across neighboring countries in the EU. And there I developed my analytical skills in assessing environmental impacts and policy compliance. And secondly, an internship at within the UN system, so with the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, where I started working as a climate risk and value chain specialist, which this work was focusing more on applying climate risk assessments to sustainable agriculture projects worldwide. So after this internship, I then transitioned to a long-term consulting role at the FAO, indeed focusing on integrating climate risk management into sustainable development projects, and in particular focusing on sustainable agriculture and food security. So here I could apply also the knowledge that I gained through the master course at Leeds on developing tools, frameworks for climate risk identification, assessment, and management, also writing reports of different styles, from policy recommendations to indeed climate risk assessments, more scientific papers, but also business cases, descriptions that were useful to recommend indeed on climate resilient practices and technologies to different decision makers, so interacting with policymakers, but also small-scale farmers and actors along the agri-food value chain, supporting indeed the design of sustainable and resilient agricultural investment projects. So I worked mainly on 2 projects. Indeed, I worked at FAO for 4 years, and it took overall 2 years to design and develop each of these 2 projects, one in Kenya and one in Cambodia. And these were recently approved for implementation, are 2 projects funded by the Global the Green Climate Fund, and indeed implemented by FAO. And these two projects are particularly important for me because I had the chance to help directly with the design to support building the climate rationale of this project. So my role was focusing on making sure that climate resilient interventions were integrated into the project design and activities to make sure that climate information will be available during implementation to the farmers and actors across the value chain to make climate-informed decisions on improving their production, but also harvesting techniques, as well as climate proofing, storage and processing technologies and infrastructure, but also linking climate information with market information, for example, to support farmers with making decision on how to best sell their final products and engage across the value chain. So as a result of this work with my team, we also brought a guiding material with example of best practices that can be recommended in the agriculture sector for crop, fishery, livestock, and forestry value chains, for example. And so this experience was really helpful to, was an opportunity to interact with major climate finance institutions, for example, indeed the Green Climate Fund and the Global Environmental Facility. And now I'm stepping into this new role as a junior professional officer, or JPO, which is a program that is financed by the government of Italy. And I will be working with the Caribbean Development Bank in Barbados as a risk analyst. So during a similar job, this will be, I will understand better starting next week, but it will be indeed about supporting the climate finance and renewable energy portfolio to ensure that climate resilience and sustainability is integrated within the project interventions, and also working across teams to integrate climate resilience considerations. So I think I can also stop here, and I'm happy to take any question later on. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Ariana. Really, really interesting hearing about your journey, and sounds like you've been involved with or worked in just about every country in the world by this point. So yeah, really interesting to hear all about that. But without further ado, we'll move on to our final speaker, and I am just going to reshare my slides because Ruby has one. Yeah, hopefully you can all see that, and I will pass over to our final speaker, Ruby.
Thank you, and yeah, thanks for inviting me along today. It's nice to hear about different journeys. Sustainability is so diverse. Yes, I studied at University of Leeds in the School of Geography. I've always been obsessed with food, so Bella Zoo is a food manufacturing company, which is who I work for now, but was always obsessed with food all the way through university and just my life in general, really. So I always was trying to work out how can I write about food in a lot of my essays. And studying in the School of Geography, I did BA Geography, so it was all about humans and cities, and I managed to fit lots of food supply chains, food waste, food deserts into a lot of my essays, focused my dissertation on that. So then when it came to the end of leaving Leeds, I was like, how do I marry geography and food together? Which, yeah, was a good challenge. I also knew that I didn't really want to go into like a grad scheme or anything. And I also graduated in 2020, which obviously was the COVID year. So it kind of put a little bit of a, halted the process, I think, to like moving to London or Manchester or something like that. And I ended up moving back home and getting a job more locally to where I grew up. And yeah, so when I left Leeds, it wasn't necessarily a natural career path. I started speaking to businesses more in the local area, just through sort of recommendations of people that I was meeting. And I ended up in conversation with a business owner who owns 3 brands, so Kentish Oils, Kent Crisps, and Curd and Cure, and had this big sort of facility, like manufacturing company. Well, not that big actually, but sort of a big range of different food types and products. And she realised that sustainability was quite an important thing that she needed to be thinking about, but didn't really have budget to have someone in sustainability full term. So I came in as a sustainability intern and just sort of put together a bit of a strategy, a bit of a focus, and was really building my knowledge of business alongside working in this sustainability role. So I was kind of bringing that sustainability knowledge and probably more passion than knowledge about at that moment. But then really learning from her how a business works. And then alongside this, I started writing for the newsletter Following the Footprints. And that really helped me build out my community of other people in the industry. So still being quite early in my career, it was really good to build that network. And I was writing about lots of different topics in different weeks and reaching out to different businesses and brands to interview people. So that really, really helped me, I think, to kickstart my career a little bit more and widen those circles. I think in sustainability, it's often about that collaboration piece and what you can learn from other people. So starting to build those networks, I think for me was really, really important quite early on. And then when it got to a point with those businesses where I sort of came to the end and I was looking for the next challenge, wanted a bit of a bigger business and moving to London, I moved to Bellazoo. So like I mentioned earlier, it's a food manufacturing company, and the food industry has a really big impact globally. It's obviously global supply chains, global suppliers. You've got the growing of the food, the manufacturing. There's a lot of different parts involved, so it's quite a busy area to work in, but lots of different diverse projects always going on. And so my job now is the Sustainability and Foundation Manager. So I joined as a coordinator, and then about a year and a little bit in, got promoted into the manager role, which is, yeah, it's great. I feel like I know a little bit about a lot, and work with all people across the business. A little bit of, like Andrew was saying, that it's just the day-to-day is just so diverse, which I love. So being an operational manufacturing business, we've obviously got to think about our operational footprint. So I'm doing the carbon footprint of the business, and measuring that, looking at reducing our energy use because we've got a lot of machineries. There's legislation that comes in with environmental compliance and reducing our food waste, reducing our waste. All of those impacts are quite busy in the day-to-day with working with a lot of our operational teams on site, and we've got a fleet of vans, so looking to reduce their impact as well. And then obviously that supply chain element, so getting to work with a lot of our suppliers, encouraging them to work with better farming practices, that best practice again, how can we encourage them to farm organically or regeneratively, which is really exciting for me because I get to go out and visit some of our suppliers. So in January, I was visiting an olive oil supplier in just outside Barcelona. So that's quite fun to go and learn about those projects on the ground, and really build those relationships again. I think it's, like I said, all about those relationships and learning from other people and learning from best practice from what some suppliers do and then sharing that with others. And then the final part of my role is the Bellazoo Foundation, which I absolutely love. It's we donate 3% of our profits to the Bellazoo Foundation, and then we work with charity partners to support food education projects and careers in food. And I really feel like for me, I've sort of stumbled into that part of my job, but it really really helps with I find sometimes the long-term goals and the net zero, and it can be quite hard to achieve all of those things. But having that sort of community focus and that short-term wins with volunteering and charity and all of those things really sort of keeps you motivated and keeps you going, which I think is a really important thing to balance as well. So yeah, that's kind of where I've got to today, which yeah, I've enjoyed. So I will stop there and leave any questions.
Great, thanks so much, Ruby. So yeah, some really interesting insights from three people with, I think, safe to say, quite different journeys, but all doing really interesting and amazing things, but with different routes to get to where they are now. So I think there's sort of some really good lessons there for everyone. But yeah, we'll move on to our Q&A section now. So we've had quite a few questions in the Q&A section already, so thank you very much for those. Do keep asking them. We've got the best part of half an hour if we need it. But we will start with our first question from Fidosi, which is, are there any key events or news sites regarding sustainability that you've been following, either locally or worldwide, that would be good for us to look into to increase our awareness with interviews? I don't know whether any of you want to take that first. Let's start with Andrew, seeing as it was longest ago that you did your section.
Yeah, of course. It's a really good question. Yeah, I think it's a really important part of our job to kind of keep abreast of what's going on, both locally and further afield. So, yeah, in terms of kind of how we work, I think one of the things I really like about working in climate is that because of the very need and the nature of the problem, there's so much innovation going on. And so, we spend a lot of time thinking about what are the kind of local energy solutions, for example. So we look a lot at community energy and the idea of, can local people actually own the energy system or part of the energy system, rather than it just being this kind of private entity that we buy our electricity from. Like what are the kind of more grassroots solutions that we can think about. And then likewise in circular economy or in green infrastructure, there's so much interesting stuff going on. I'm really interested in kind of sponge philosophy, which is something that actually I was reading a lot about when I was in China, and now I'm seeing more and more of it coming in over here. And that's basically the idea that cities need to be rewilded, and we need to kind of build more natural processes into the way that we set up cities. And so that's something that on a local level is really interesting, because it could be things like green walls or green roofs, or like reusing water to feed like planters where you're growing food, for example. And those kind of solutions, when you break them down, they can really work in very small spaces and in places like schools, for example, where you're getting a lot of co-benefits by talking about these kind of things. So yeah, there's not one source. I would just say like reading a lot around different climate solutions that are going on, looking at countries where they've got specific issues and usually like really interesting solutions. One that I read the other day was about green roofs being used in favelas in Rio de Janeiro, and like how people there are getting around some of the technical barriers that would normally stop those kind of solutions being used in those kind of circumstances. And there's always something that you can take away from that and think about what that could look like in your own work.
Thanks, Andrew. Ariana, have you got any sort of key things to add to that?
Yes, just maybe referring to the UN system, something that I found really useful is indeed looking into the e-learning programs that are available, that are all publicly available and accessible, and they relate to any topic, and I think they provide a good understanding of what is happening, yes, at the international level, but also through specific examples at the local level, with examples worldwide on climate action, innovative, sustainable interventions, projects that are being implemented, and this is definitely helpful to keep yourself up to date, but also engaging perhaps in global events that are also organized by the United Nations, also specifically for youth, for early graduates. For example, at the FAO every year there is the World Food Forum, which is a global event specifically on food and agriculture, where experts worldwide join to present innovative solutions and discuss the most, let's say, important topics at the international level, where also country representatives participate. So I think it's a great opportunity to network, for example.
And I won't necessarily ask all three of you for an answer to every single question, but I think given that this is such a sort of relevant and interesting question. I will also ask Ruby if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think there's loads of good newsletters. I think you can sometimes get bombarded as well with hundreds of newsletters that come in every day, every week, and there's so much changing. So I think it's definitely about finding whether it's the particular industry that you're interested in, and find those key newsletters that really give you the insights of, like, for instance, for me, the food legislation that's coming through, or packaging insights or anything like that. So I think being really kind of streamlined with what you're finding. But yeah, I think there's loads of good newsletters like ED and Good Business, and yeah, lots of people share different ones on LinkedIn as well. So I think just keeping an eye out.
Great, thank you all for such good answers to that, and yeah, thank you to Fidelity for your question. We've got a question in the chat about how would you recommend getting relevant experience in the sustainability sector. I may also just add to that and direct maybe in the first instance this question to Ruby, just because in your presentation you were talking about how it sounded like you created sort of some of your own opportunities by reaching out to people directly and contacting people and that sort of thing, and sort of linked to that question about experience, what would be your advice for anyone looking to do similar in that situation?
Yeah, it's a really hard one, because I think it's always that sort of loop, isn't it, of getting the relevant experience to get the job, and then not getting the job to get the relevant experience. So I think it is a really, really tricky one that everyone goes through, and everyone always feels that challenge. So you're definitely not alone in that. I think definitely it is kind of about making a lot of your own experiences. And I think because sustainability is so broad, you can do that a little bit more easily with getting involved in volunteering or helping out with sort of charity work, if that's what you're interested in, or getting involved in, like, there's loads of green teams or policy events that you can get involved in just as sort of a member of the public. So again, I would say it's about widening those circles, building those networks. There's loads of conferences, trade events that are free as well. So if you can get to those, and if you can sort of chat to a couple of people at those that you might have an interest in that area of business, or you've researched their business or something like that, and just building out, adding them on LinkedIn and sort of getting that sort of network built, then those opportunities might also present themselves. But I think definitely reaching out to any newsletters is a great idea, or sort of writing your own pieces of content. And I hired someone in my team recently, and I was really impressed because they pitched becoming a B Corp to the business that they were working in, and just didn't end up happening. But I just thought that was great initiative, and kind of going above and beyond however you can see fit. So I think yeah, just taking whatever opportunity you can really does help build out, because so much of this is driven by kind of that passion and that interest. So if you can show that you've got that, even if you don't have the experience, then I think that goes a really long way.
Great, really interesting. Thank you so much for that, Ruby. I think, again, this is one that is so relevant and interesting, a question that I'm going to go back along the panel for this one. So Ariana, if you had anything you wanted to add to that.
Yes, indeed, I totally agree that sustainability is such a broad topic that it's important to keep an open mind on what you can contribute to, and also what you can learn further through the work and the tasks that are assigned. So I think, yeah, important to keep an open mind, and at the same time also be clear to yourself and reflecting on what you can bring in a more innovative way, because indeed sustainability is integrated now. It has to be integrated into any aspect of the work, even if you're going to join an institution or company that does not necessarily work on sustainability. Your role can be indeed to integrate that into the work. So I'm also assuming that if you're hearing this in this meeting, it's because you had the chance to interact with sustainability topics through your career. So any one of you has already, let's say, a perspective that you can bring to the job, and so also, let's say, pushing on that, and let's say, be clear on what you can bring in terms of sustainability to the work is a great asset that you should be leveraging upon.
Thank you so much. And Andrew, anything to add?
Yeah, I think I'd just concur that there's so many opportunities in climate and sustainability. And one of the things that is really exciting, I think, about this space is that it's all quite new. Like, you don't have centuries of practice, and like companies have been doing it for decades and decades and decades, because it's a fairly new issue for people to be working on. And that means that there's loads of space for innovation. There's also loads of space for kind of interpreting what that could be. And so, when we're thinking about climate, we're thinking about it in terms of energy, in terms of food, like the way that we experience our buildings, the comfort that we have in them, like waste, transport. There's so many different things, like nature as well. And if you think about what interests you in your life outside of work or your life outside of academia, there's always a way that it will intersect with sustainability, which is great, because it means there's so many ways that you can do things that you care about and also be building up skills and building up experience. And we work with loads of students, so we quite often bring students from local universities into our teams, and we have grads, and it's an area where actually you can make a difference quite quickly. And I'd say that just one other thing to think about is that often the kind of route that people take into sustainability and climate is activism. And I think that's a really important link that we need to really cherish. And there's always different ways that you can get involved in things like community gardens, food banks, soup kitchens, where, they might not be talking about net zero and they might not be talking about climate, but actually the work that they're doing is really important in those kind of areas. And so using those kind of things as a stepping stone, I think, can be really, really valuable.
Yeah, thank you so much for that from all three of you. And I think just to echo that, while sustainability isn't something I'm kind of an expert in, I think that message there about there's so many different routes in and sort of not narrowing your search too down on anything. And that goes for any career. Your first step or your second step doesn't have to be sort of what you want to do for the rest of your career. So do keep an open mind and your options open. Next question from Anya possibly ties a little bit into what Andrew was saying there about activism. And I guess on the subject of activism, sometimes you're an activist because you're fighting against resistance from people. And Anya's question is, have you faced any resistance to change from organizations or anyone else? And how do you deal with this? I'm guessing there's a reasonable chance that all three of you have, but I'm going to leave that one open for whichever one of you wants to come in first, maybe.
I can jump in on this one. Working in government, there's always resistance to everything, so it's quite an easy one for me to answer. I think that kind of, as I suggested earlier, there's often a degree of translation around the way that people understand sustainability and climate. And for a lot of people, and especially people who are really in vulnerable circumstances, it isn't always seen as something that is really positive or that will improve their lives. And then really, if you want to change those kind of opinions, you have to offer something that will do that for people. And I think on an individual basis, that's why actually when we're talking about climate, we're rarely using phrases like net zero or talking about targets, but we're thinking about what is the actual real life impact? Like, how are you going to feel as a result of this? Like, is that connection with nature going to be better for your kids because they're going to be breathing cleaner air? Like, that's a message that people can get behind. Does it mean that you're eating healthier food? Does it mean that you're spending less on your energy bills? These are the kind of ways that you need to talk to people about climate solutions, because if people see it as you're telling us not to drive our car, or you're telling us to buy an electric vehicle that we can't afford, it doesn't resonate and people get upset about it. And I think it's really important that we think about how we are talking about these kind of issues, because it's really key to acknowledge that actually the people that suffer the most as a result of climate are not the ones that are creating the issues on the whole. And so that justice element, I think, is really key. And then just to finish off, I think that when you think about internally at organizations, especially working in local government where you've got thousands of people working in all different aspects of public life, it's really important to understand again that everyone's got their job, and that will not necessarily mean that their interest is in climate or in sustainability. And again, it's about making people understand that by thinking in a slightly different way, you can make your job better, your job easier, and you can improve the lives of the people that your job is meant to be serving. And that's really key, because at a time when there's not a lot of money, you have to get creative about how do we make sure that we're showing that this is a really impactful project, and that actually we should be putting money into this, we should be putting resource into this, and that those conversations can be held in a way that is actually bringing people on board rather than saying you have to change. I think that's kind of the same approach taken on the individual level and on the organizational level. And that's something that I think is a challenge constantly, but it's something that our team has been really successful at over the last couple of years. And so I really do think that that's just the way that we need to start communicating on sustainability.
Great, thank you very much for that. I could see that you beat Ruby to turning your mic off and chipping in by, I think, a split second there. So I'm going to pass to Ruby next on that one.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree. I think I was going to sort of talk about more from inside a business, being that sustainability sort of champion as well. But you do have to communicate in that same way of making it really aligning objectives for other teams and making sure that, sustainability ticks all of their objectives and their goals, or you can align it with it, just because then it becomes much easier. And I think the way to communicate that is exactly like Andrew just explained, to make people realize why it has benefit for them as well. I think working in a business where it's not like a purpose-led business, that's not the mission of the business. Everyone is behind it and understands that it's the right thing to do, but it doesn't always come top of the agenda. So there's a lot of resistance to always trying to get it to the top of the agenda, whether that's just small projects or big projects or even being on the agenda. So I do think there has to be a level of resilience to sort of continuing to push that. But again, I really enjoy that part of the challenge. And I keep talking about people, but I feel like building those relationships with my colleagues really helps to push those forward. And when you do then actually get sustainability or any of those projects, or it to actually be part of the strategy for what you're trying to get it to, I think there's a huge win there, because it's not just kind of achieving the project, it's actually just getting the backing, and you really get to learn about different areas of the business as well, to figure out how you can tie them in and how you can influence packaging or supply chain or anything like that. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge, but feels good when you do it.
Right. And finally, Ariana, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yes, and if I can quickly add to that, communication is key. Make sure that you can tell the story and build the case. For example, yeah, in my case, in the climate risk management team at FAO, we have been working across 4 years since the team was created to make sure that climate risk considerations are integrated into the project design. And of course, we have always faced some resistance from the project formulators that because indeed adding a climate risk assessment to the feasibility study would add another layer of complexity to the design of the project. So it was very important to make clear how these assessments can add value to the project, and they are deeply connected with the project activities, and also really explaining how the climate action interventions that we recommend have a clear impact, as both Andrew and Ruby mentioned, and both from a science-based evidence point of view, but also through real life impact cases from social or economic points of view, by showing, for example, concrete and practical examples of the benefits of climate action. So this is, yeah, I think what is most important, at least in the project management sector.
Right, three really interesting answers there to a really great question. So thank you for that, Anya. So I guess that's maybe a little bit of a more, not negative, but more challenging aspect of sort of working in sustainability, the sort of resistance and the objections. So maybe if we go from that into a slightly more positive one, we've got a question here that's a really nice one around what do you enjoy most about working in sustainability? I've sort of lost track of where we are in the order, but so let's start with Ariana again, if you want to answer that one.
Yes, sure. So yes, what I've been enjoying the most has been definitely the interactions with actors from different countries, different contexts worldwide within the UN system. It has been really an invaluable opportunity to talk, to collaborate with policymakers, decision makers of any type, also including small-scale farmers and small businesses and institutions working on the food and agriculture sector. So yes, being able to also explore different cultures, way of working through the FAO network of regional and country offices worldwide has been, I think, the greatest opportunity, and definitely working with different actors with ensuring that their needs are met through the development of these projects worldwide, and making sure that no harm is made from a social, economic, and environmental point of view is, I think, great satisfaction that I was able to gain through the support provided through these projects.
Great. And Ruby, other than sort of getting to utilize your love of food, what's sort of the best thing about working in the sustainability sector?
I mean, that's definitely a perk. I think having sort of drilled down into the area that I really enjoy, I do love being able to talk about food in every conversation, and it makes it easier to kind of translate all that carbon jargon when you're actually talking about something that's interesting. So yeah, definitely feel very lucky that I've managed to make that happen. But I would say the best bit for me is definitely the diversity in the day-to-day and all the different projects. And like I said earlier, I always say I feel like I know a little bit about a lot, and really rely on, you know, learning from the engineering team. How do we reduce energy in our manufacturing, and learn about lifespan on like manufacturing units and things like that, and start sort of building that knowledge up in all of those different areas. And yeah, I really feel like I can draw on that knowledge from different people, and yeah, I'm quite a people person, so I think building that community and the fact that collaboration, you don't tend to get collaboration. It's always about competition in other parts of business. So you'd never really share your sales figures with your competition in the industry, but in sustainability, everyone does. And I feel like that's such a lovely thing as well, to learn from your peers and your colleagues in the wider industry, and really feel like you're making a difference, like in that bigger shift, not just your day-to-day area. But yeah, I feel like it does feel, when I was at uni, I was always wanting to do something to sort of work towards sustainability and all of the issues we're facing. So it feels good now that I can feel like I'm actually making a tiny dent. But yeah.
Great. Yeah, I shouldn't have said other than the food, because obviously what a great thing to be able to utilize your interests, but a really good point on that sharing and collaboration aspect of sustainability. Andrew.
Yeah, I think I really agree with a lot of what's been said already. I think that when you're working, people are always one of the key things that defines whether you have a good experience or a bad experience. And one of the nice things about working in climate and sustainability is that it tends to be people who have kind of a good intention at heart. People aren't in it necessarily to just to make money, or it's not as competitive as Ruby's been saying. But I think, yeah, it's just, you want to work with inspiring people, and you want to see people that are really putting time and energy into trying to make the world a bit better. And so it's a really nice space to be in, knowing that that is the majority of people that you'll be working with. And I think also from a graduate's point of view, it's also an area where there's a really good group of young people that actually take on responsibilities that in another career you would have to wait a lot longer for. And I definitely felt that in the few years where I was working in central government, getting promoted a few times to a manager position really quickly. It's not something that I think you see in a lot of careers, but again, because it's quite a new industry, and I guess also because young people probably have a bit more motivation and maybe a bit more kind of awareness of these kind of issues, I think it's a really good place for a young person to work, and there's so many opportunities that will come with that. But yeah, for me, it's all about impact. Like, if I feel like I'm able to make a difference with my work, then I'm generally pretty happy. And I definitely think the varied nature of what I do is really, really great. And being able to jump between lots of different projects and learn so much about lots of different things, I find really stimulating as well. So yeah, I think there's a lot of different strings to the bow when you work in climate, and that's something that's really exciting.
Right. Yeah. Sounds like lots of positives to working in the sector. So good news for anyone who's joined us hoping to find a career in sustainability. So we're nearly at the end of time. So we'll just finish with a final question, which kind of, I guess, a relatively quick fire one for each of you. So if you had one piece of advice you'd give to a recent graduate looking to get into this sustainability sector, what would that be? Let's start as we began with Andrew again. We'll go back through along the panel.
Yeah, sure. I would just say try stuff out. Like, my route into what I'm doing now has been so winding and meandering, and I really have tried out a lot of things and sort of worked out which bits I like, which bits I don't like so much. And I think being open to that can really open a lot of doors and mean that you meet some great people and start to understand what your path could look like. So yeah, just being open and trying things out. You get what you put in, I think, as with most careers. So yeah, that's my one big tip.
if I can contribute, indeed, I totally agree. I think being proactive is the most important thing to do at the beginning. Be creative, and try to interact with as many people as possible. Also, trying to explore different opportunities across organizations, from the public to the private sector. There are opportunities everywhere. So indeed, keep an open mind and try to bring your own perspective is definitely key.
I would completely agree with what you guys have said. I think also kind of leaning into your passion is a really big thing, because and it's exactly what has already been said, but once you sort of just enjoy what you're doing and find that joy within the space and meet other people that are in the same area, then you'll start building your networks. And I think that passion really really shines through with any of the sort of job searching, and even once you're in your career, and just trying out new things and getting stuck in and involved as much as possible. Definitely.
Great. Well, thank you so much for giving up your time. Thank you to Andrew, Ariana, and Ruby, 3 fantastic speakers. And I certainly learned a lot. And I'm sure everyone on the call will have done it as well. We have got a QR code there just for any feedback you've got about this event. It really helps us to improve upon them for the future and find out what you want from them. So if you have got 30 seconds just to fill that in, that'd be fantastic. We've also got as part of Sustainability Week, we've got, if you are in Leeds, we've got a session taking place tomorrow afternoon after work between 5 o'clock and 6:15, where you can meet employers operating in the sustainability sector. That link should work if you're registered on My Career. Give one of us a shout if you can't access that for any reason. But I think for now, I'm just going to say thank you very much to all 3 of our guest speakers, and thank you to all our attendees for your participation and your fantastic questions. And keep in touch, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.